Welcome to 1844 Made Simple. When you read the Bible, one point comes through. There is a judgment or judgments. We find it over and over again in Scripture. Just look at these few texts and you tell me whether or not they talk about some kind of judgment, end-time judgment or judgments, a judgment by works as well. 2 Corinthians 5:10, for we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that everyone may receive the things done in the body according to what he has done, whether it good or bad. Revelation 22:12, and behold, I am coming quickly, and my reward is with me to give everyone according to his work. 1 Peter 4:17, for the time has come for judgment to begin at the house of God. Matthew 12:36, but I say unto you that every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give an account thereof in the day of judgment. And powerful one, Ecclesiastes 12:14, for God shall bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. Now, folks, these are just a few of many, many texts that not only talk about judgment, but a judgment by works, a judgment about our lives, our idle words, a judgment on how we lived. But you know, that presents a problem, doesn't it? And that's because we're saved by grace, by faith, without the deeds of the law. I mean, after all, isn't that what the gospel is all about? I mean, come on, who is going to stand when every secret thing, when every idle word will be brought in judgment? I'm in trouble for what I've done publicly, much less privately. So how then can we stand? How are we to reconcile the idea of judgment with the idea of grace? Now, folks, this is not, nor it has been, only a Seventh-day Adventist question. On the contrary, Christian literature through the centuries has wrestled with this issue, how to reconcile salvation by faith and judgment by works. Two doctrines clearly taught in the Bible. Evangelical literature is filled with their best theologians wrestling with this difficult question. But guess what? I believe that as Seventh-day Adventists, we have the key to help unlock the challenge presented here between judgment by works and salvation by faith. And it's found in our sanctuary message, and specifically this one verse. Vayomer Eli ad erev boker al panim ushlosh meot v'nitztak kodesh. You know it better as Daniel 8:14. And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Or what we as Adventists call the pre-Advent judgment. I want you to imagine that you were a Jew living in the time of the wilderness wanderings, after the tabernacle had been built and the Jews had been worshiping the Lord there. Now, suppose, however, that your understanding of the ritual was limited only to the sacrifice of the animal in the courtyard. Suppose that was all you concentrated on at the expense of the rest of the ministry, including, even especially, the work of the priest in the most holy place on the Day of Atonement. Now, let me ask you a question. Who would have a better understanding of the entire plan of salvation? The one whose focus began and ended with the sacrifice in the courtyard? Or the one who embraced the entire ritual, beginning with the sacrifice, but also understood the ministry of the high priest on the Day of Atonement? Well, of course, the answer is obvious. The answer is obvious that the one whose understanding embraced the entire sanctuary would have a better understanding than the one who focused only on the death of the animal. In fact, I would say that the one who understands the entire sanctuary service would have a better understanding of the death of the animal and what it meant than one whose understanding was limited only to the death of the animal itself. And that is because the death of the animal was part of a larger picture. And to limit yourself to that would mean to miss the big picture. Suppose, like, for example, you had a 10-chapter murder mystery, and you read only the first chapter, the one that the murder takes place. But that's all you read. You don't read the rest of the book where the murder is solved. If your focus is only on the first chapter, are you not going to have a limited understanding of even the first chapter and what it means, as would somebody who read the whole book? Of course. So in the same way, those whose focus is on the cross alone, without understanding Christ's high priestly ministry that follows, will not have as good as an understanding of the cross and what it means as would those who have studied Christ's high priestly ministry as well, which follow the cross. Hence, we have what we call our sanctuary message, which includes the cross, which is built upon the cross, which has its foundations in the cross, but is not limited to it. I mean, after all, what do you do with the good portion of the book of Hebrews, which has as its main point Christ's high priestly ministry in the heavenly sanctuary? Now, think about this too. Was the death of the animal in the sanctuary service in any way in tension or in contradiction with the work of the high priest on the Day of Atonement? Was there any kind of tension, any contradiction between them? Of course not. They were two parts of the same whole. Now, if you think there's a tension, if you think there's a contradiction, then you either don't understand the death of the animal, or you don't understand the ministry of the Day of Atonement, or you don't understand both. Okay, think about Christ's death on the cross now. Think about Christ's death on the cross and his high priestly ministry. These are not in tension or in contradiction with each other, are they? Of course not. If your understanding of the cross, symbolized by the death of the animal, is in any way in tension or in contradiction to the pre-Advent judgment symbolized by the high priest, by the work of the high priest on the Day of Atonement, if you've got the cross and your understanding of Christ's high priestly ministry, if they're in tension, then you either don't understand the cross, or you don't understand Christ's high priestly ministry, or you don't understand both, because they are two parts of a whole. They are in harmony with each other. Look at this text, Hebrews 8, 1 and 2. Now, this is the main points which we are saying. We have such a high priest who is set on the right hand of the throne of the majesty in heavens, a minister of the sanctuary and of the true tabernacle, which the Lord erected and not man. Now, notice with me, where are these verses? The beginning of chapter 8 in Hebrews, which means that the main point of the first 7 chapters in a book with 13 chapters deals with Christ's ministry in the heavenly sanctuary. Yet so much Christianity ignores it. But you see, we as Adventists don't, and we shouldn't, because Christ's high priestly ministry unholds the key to understanding salvation by faith and judgment by works. And again, the crucial text that I believe unlocks this question is Daniel 8:14. And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, and shall the sanctuary be cleansed. And that is what we're going to study with the focus on two things here. First, how do we get the date 1844 from the Bible? That is going to be the main thrust of this study. That's what we're going to focus, how we get the date. Second, how does this text help resolve the question of judgment by works and salvation by faith? This is what we are going to be dealing with in this study, these two things. Now, we want to start with Daniel 2, a part of the Bible that we all should be familiar with. If not, you need to be. Okay, as we know, the chapter begins when Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, has a dream that he can't remember, and thus he doesn't understand. Obviously, if he can't remember it, he can't understand it. Well, he gathers all the wise men and orders them to tell him the dream first and then interpret it. After all, if they can tell him a dream that he himself can't remember, then he could trust their interpretation. Of course, these are a bunch of charlatans, and they can't tell him the dream. The king gets mad, and he's going to have everybody killed, including Daniel and the 3 Hebrew captives. But in the end, the Lord reveals to Daniel and the interpretation, and everyone's life is spared. Okay, now the dream, of course, as we know, if you know Daniel 2, was of a giant statue. The head was of gold, the breasts and arms were of silver, the belly and thighs were of brass, the legs were iron, and the feet part iron and part clay. That's the dream. okay, the statue. But then we come to the last part, and that's the part I want to focus especially on. All these kingdoms in Daniel 2, you got the gold and the silver, blah, blah, blah. They come and go, and then there is this. Finally, a stone was cut out without hands, which struck the image on the feet of iron and clay and broke them into pieces. And the stone became the image became a great mountain that filled the whole earth. That's Daniel 2, 34 and 35. That's how it ends. Okay, Daniel then interprets the dream for the king, telling him that the head of gold represented him, the king of Babylon, a symbol for the nation. Babylon was represented by the gold. Afterwards, another kingdom, the silver, would arise, then another, the brass, and then finally, the one on the legs, the iron. The iron breaks apart, and that breaks apart into the iron and clay in the feet, into smaller powers that it says will not cleave one to another, even as iron does not mix with clay. Then finally, the stone, this mountain comes down and fills all the earth, and that's symbol of God's final kingdom, and it will stand forever. Now, folks, for centuries, this dream has been interpreted as follows and understood as follows. Okay, Babylon, the gold head. Okay, Medo-Persia, the silver and the arms and the chest. Greece, the belly and brass thighs. Okay, Rome, the legs of iron and clay. And then finally, God's eternal kingdom, the stone cut out without hands. Now, a few points to consider when we look at Daniel 2. First of all, this is not just an SDA interpretation, far from it. Millions of Christians and Jews have interpreted this chapter this way for centuries. Get this in your head. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, God's eternal kingdom. In fact, as we go through this, all four of these kingdoms are definitely identified. Daniel comes out, names three of them for us, and with Rome and with the New Testament, the fourth one, Rome, is all but identified for us. We'll cover this more on the website later. But now, here is a key point that I want you to remember. Don't forget this, okay? We've got Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, okay? This sequence, don't forget, this sequence forms the outline for the rest of the prophecies that we're going to study. All the other prophecies are going to be based on this broad foundation. Okay, this will become clearer as we move on. Now, that's the first point. And we also come to another point that I'm going to repeat and repeat ad nauseum, because once you get it down, you will save yourself from a common error that is taught almost everywhere in Christendom. Almost everywhere. Now, listen to this. Unlike the first three kingdoms, whose metals stop after their demise, you got the head of gold, then you got the brass, the silver stops, and then then the brass, the gold, silver, brass, and the iron. Unlike these first three kingdoms, whose metals stop after their demise, the iron of the fourth kingdom remains until the end of the world, even if the feet and toes becomes mixed with miry clay. Okay, the legs of iron, its feet part of iron and part of clay. In other words, listen to this point. The iron that starts in the legs remains in the feet. And the iron stays there all the way to the end. So the point is, the kingdom that began after Greece, after the brass that starts in the leg, extends all the way to the end of the world. It will be there to the bitter end. Okay, so the point. The fourth kingdom, which arose after Greece and whose legs and toes are of iron, though changing form, extends to the end of the world. Now, this fact helps positively identify this, because what world power arising after Greece, after the bronze and the belly and thighs, the iron extends all the way to the end of time. What power after Greece all the way to the end, though it changes form? Only one, and that is Rome. Solely, totally, and only Rome. What other possible power arises right after ancient Greece, which ended centuries before Christ, yet extends to the end of time and beyond? Again, it could be solely, what could it be but Rome? Solely, totally, and only Rome. Look at this again. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, second coming. Now think about this for a minute. What firmer, broader, and more immutable foundation, the history of the world itself, could God have used to build for us such a rational edifice for faith? I mean, the world could blow up tomorrow, but there'll have always been a Babylon, always been a Medo-Persia, always been a Greece, always been a Rome. I mean, if you're God and you're looking down at these people and you want to give these people on earth an immutable foundation, what more broader foundation could he give us than the history of the world? We have been given a foundation as immutable, as unchangeable as the past itself. I mean, even God can't change the past. So this is what God has given to help us ground our faith in. It's a rational faith, to be sure, but it's faith. Anyway, points to remember so far, okay? You've got Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, God's final kingdom. Okay, this sequence performs the prophetic outline for all the rest of what we're going to study. All the other prophecies are basically going to be based on this broad and firm and immutable foundation. That's the first point. Second point, don't forget this. This is crucial. The fourth kingdom, the iron of Rome, which comes up after Greece, extends to the end of time, though at some point it changes form. Hey, if you need to stop this seminar right now and go over this material in Daniel 2, do it. Learn this sequence. See how Rome goes all the way to the end. Learn it so well you could teach it to others all the way through the seminar. I'm going to tell you, if you got to stop and go through this in your Bible, do it till you're perfect. It's really clear. Trust me, you won't be sorry. Anyway, that's Daniel 2. Now I want to go to Daniel 7. It's a chapter that really gives us more than any other one solid reasons for believing in the pre-Advent judgment. I could say pretty safely that if all we had were Daniel 7 alone, we'd have all we would need to believe in it. Okay? Daniel 7 covers the same ground as Daniel 2, only more details are given. Okay, in this chapter, Daniel himself has a dream. Okay, he sees 4 beasts come up out of the sea, and in the visions, he's told they represent 4 kingdoms that will arise, one after another, until God establishes a final kingdom that will last forever. 4 kingdoms in succession, and a final kingdom that lasts forever? Now, if I'm not mistaken, didn't we just see something like that in Daniel 2? Of course. As I said, many of the chapters that follow are simply expanding on what we have in Daniel 2. Don't forget that point. Anyway, in Daniel 7, he sees 4 beasts, which he tells represents 4 kingdoms, okay? The first beast was like a lion, but it had eagle's wings. The second was like a bear. The third was a leopard. And the fourth was described like this, okay? Look at this. The fourth beast, Daniel 7, 7, and 8. He says, and after this I saw in night visions, and behold, a 4th beast. Okay, notice now, 4 kingdoms, a 4th beast. Dreadful and terrible, and it had huge iron teeth, and there was a little horn that came up from among them, and on and on and on. You can read that more carefully yourself. He sees these beasts, including this 4th one, out of which a horn grows. Now, we're going to come back to that very shortly, that horn shortly. But the point is, what do these beasts represent? Well, again, it's commonly understood by both Jewish and Christian expositors that we have in Daniel 7 a repetition of Daniel 2, though now more details are being added. Okay, so look at Daniel 7 here. Okay, we got the lion as Babylon, the bear, Medo-Persia, the Greece is the leopard, the 4th beast, Rome, God's final kingdom. This is how it has been interpreted for centuries. Again, this is not some distinctly SDA interpretation. Many scholars and many different religions have seen this as well. Same interpretation. Now, what's interesting, too, is amid all these images, Daniel asks what all this means. And look at what he is told. Look at what the interpretation itself that is given to him. Daniel 7, 17 and 18 says, those great beasts, which are 4 kingdoms which arise out of the earth, 4 kings which arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever and ever. Again, what have we said before? 4 kingdoms followed by God's eternal one? Sounds somewhat like Daniel 2, does it not? 4 kingdoms, and then God's final one comes. Then, interestingly enough, look what comes next. Look what comes next. Okay, then I wish to know the truth about the 4th beast, who was different from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, with teeth of iron and its nails of bronze, which devoured and brake in pieces and stamped and trampled the residue with its feet. Okay, Daniel, notice here, Daniel wants us to focus specifically on the 4th beast. Now, notice with me some important similarities between the 4th beast in Daniel 7 and the 4th power in Daniel 2. I want you to see this. Okay, first, of course, they're the 4th power to arise in both chapters. Okay, these are some of the similarities. They're the 4th chapter in both chapters. Both come after Greece, and both are the last earthly kingdom before God establishes his final one. What's next? Both have iron in them. The 4th kingdom was almost all of iron, and the 4th beast, that's in Daniel 2, and the 4th beast in Daniel 7 is said to have iron teeth. The 4th kingdom in Daniel 2 is described that one that smashes and breaks things, other nations, obviously. And the 4th kingdom in Daniel 7 is described in a similar way, saying it devoured and brake in pieces and trampled the residue with its feet. Okay, and the most important similarity between the 4th kingdom in Daniel 2 and the 4th kingdom in Daniel 7 is this. Both change forms, even though they remain the same power right down to the end of time. Don't miss this. The statue in Daniel 2, the legs were of iron and the feet and toes were of what? Iron and clay. The point is the iron, which began after Greece, extends all the way down to the end of time, when the stone cut out without hands smashes it all. In other words, the iron, again, which arose after Greece, remains to the end of time, though it changed form. In the case of Daniel 2, it becomes mixed with clay, but it was still iron all the way from after Greece until the end of the world. Don't miss that point. Similarly, what we have in Daniel 7 are 4 kingdoms, with the last one, the 4th one, which arises after Greece and extends all the way to the end of the world, though at some point it changes form. And it's in that second form, the latter form, that it reaches its ultimate demise at the end of the world, okay? Just like in Daniel 2. And the second phase is the little horn power that arises out of the 4th beast and becomes the focus of the prophecy. Look at these texts with me. Okay, Daniel 7, 7, 8. And I saw in night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, and it had 10 horns. And I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one, coming up among them. So a little horn power arises out of the 4th beast. Now, notice too, in the description of the 4th beast, a great deal of emphasis is placed on the little horn power. It becomes the focal of the prophecy. Now, here's the point. Don't miss this. The little horn power is not a separate power. It's still part of the 4th beast, just a different phrase of it. Please get this down. In Daniel 7, as in Daniel 2, the 4th and final power goes all the way from the demise of Greece to the end of the world. I keep doing this because I'm thinking of Daniel 2, but it's the same principle. Now, a simple question. What power comes up after Greece and extends all the way down through history, even into our present era? Folks, what could it be but Rome? First pagan Rome, then papal Rome, the second phase of the 4th beast. Okay, here's Daniel 7 again. The lion is Babylon, the bear is Medo-Persia, the leopard is Greece, and the 4th beast is Rome, pagan, then papal Rome. Now, we'll focus now on the 4th beast, which caught Daniel's attention. He sees this horrible beast arise right out of Greece. Well, what power arose out of Greece? Of course, as we've been saying, Rome, pagan Rome first. What else could it be? But then what happens? As I said, the 4th beast power had 10 horns on its head. But then another power arises among them, a horn that is part of another horn arises, but it's part of the 4th beast. Get this point. It's not a separate power. It's still a part of Rome, this horn, though a different phase. Again, forgive me for repeating this point, but I can't emphasize it enough, okay? The little horn power is part of the fourth beast. Now, what are the attributes of this little horn power? The little horn phase of the fourth beast. Well, in fact, there are many. In fact, the main emphasis is on this little horn power that arises out of the fourth beast, but remains part of it. The fact that there's so much emphasis placed on this and so many details are given should tell us something about its great importance. Now, let's read these texts themselves together. Now, remember where we've been. We've just been through the first three powers: Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece. We're now on the fourth one. Here again now is the vision of the fourth beast. And he says, and this I saw in night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, okay? And it had 10 horns, and I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one, coming up among them, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things, pompous words. First, we see that the beast power that arises right after Greece. Then out of this beast power, a little horn arises, a horn that uproots 3 other horns and that speaks pompous words. Now, here is the interpretation of the beast power and the horn that comes out of it but remains part of it. This is what the scripture says about it. Okay. Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all other kingdoms, and he shall devour the whole earth and trample and break it in pieces. And then he goes on. The 10 horns are 10 kings which will arise from this kingdom. Notice they're from this kingdom. They're part of the kingdom. And another shall arise after them, and he shall be different from the first one, and he shall subdue 3 kings. He shall speak pompous words against the Most High, persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall intend to change times and laws. Now, why do we interpret the little horn that arises out of the fourth beast, pagan Rome, as papal Rome? Now, again, please, folks, this is not just an SDA interpretation. Far from it. For centuries, it was one of the central teaching of the Protestant reformers. Jewish scholars have seen it as well. We'll deal with more of this on the website. But why? Why is papal Rome the only correct interpretation? Well, let's look at it carefully, because this leads us right to where we want to go. Now, notice with me, too, that many details are given about this phase of the fourth beast. Many details are given, more than anything else we've seen in any of the prophecies so far. If nothing else, that should tell us how important this little horn power is to us, okay, and our understanding of it, okay? First, the little horn rose out of pagan Rome. Okay, papal Rome, of course, rose from pagan Rome. That's the first one. In fact, look at this quote. British philosopher Thomas Hobbes, who lived in the 1600s, wrote, listen to this quote. I like this. If a man consider the origin of this great ecclesiastical dominion, he will easily perceive that the papacy is no other than the ghost of the deceased Roman Empire, sitting crowned on the grace thereof. Thomas Hobbes from Leviathan. Okay, the little horn came up from among 10 horns that were part of the fourth beast. The pagan Roman Empire, instead of disappearing, simply was picked apart by various barbarian tribes, the 10 horns seen in the beast. And then among those tribes was this new horn, another tribe, this little horn, which was kind of like another one of the tribes almost. The papacy just did that. It arose among these tribes, okay? Verse said that it would subdue 3 kings, meaning it would uproot 3 of those tribes, which the papacy obviously did. Now, notice this. The little horn was described as different from the other ones. And certainly the papacy, earlier I said it was a tribe. That really wouldn't call it a tribe. It was just another power, another entity, but it was certainly different from all those other barbarian kingdoms, okay? And the little horn power in earlier depiction was described as greater than these other little horn powers, which it obviously was, because it alone became dominant. Again, this is a perfect depiction of the papacy. After all, it still exists today when those barbarian tribes disappeared a long time ago. Okay? Now, the little horn power is described as speaking pompous words against the Most High. I'm not going to have time to get into that now, but we will. Anyone who knows anything at all about the claims that the Roman papacy has made for itself and still does knows that this is a perfect depiction of the papacy. Perfect. We'll deal with this more on the website. Okay, the little horn shall persecute the saints of the Most High. Okay, this is another description. Please, however much all this has been glossed over in recent years with all the ecumenical talks and so forth, the fact that remains that for more than 1,000 years, Rome viciously and violently persecuted those who dared to oppose her, with things getting really bad in the days of the Reformation. Again, this is a perfect description of papal Rome. Okay, now, another attribute. The little horn power will, quote, intend to change times and law, Daniel 7:25. Now, what Adventist doesn't know how central papal Rome was in the, quote, official change of the seventh-day Sabbath to Sunday? I mean, history is filled with quotes. See, it's interesting, too, because most of those quotes were from years ago, when the papacy would kind of taunt Protestants about this change. But they don't do that so much anymore, not in this era of ecumenism. Though here's a later quote. I'll put it up here. You can read it yourself. Stop the tape and read it yourself and so on, because this says very clear, Rome claiming the change of the Sabbath to Sunday. Okay? Now, we come to the last attribute of the little horn power. And in some ways, for our purposes, the most important one. Now, I say that because of all the things that we have so far, we have more than enough evidence to show here that we are dealing with papal Rome. Please, folks, what else could it be? It can't be anything else, not if you're going to be true to the text. But now, look at this last attribute that we're given here regarding this little horn power. It says, the saint shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. Daniel 7:25. Now, what do we have here? First of all, we have in the prophecies that we have been looking at so far, Daniel 2 and Daniel 7, we have our first apocalyptic time prophecy. Apocalyptic meaning last days. Thus, with all the symbols that we've looked at, we're not given any time frame until now. Now, what does this time and half a time mean? Again, a lot of scholars, Christian and Jewish, understand the word time to mean year, times to mean 2 years, and half a time, half a year. So what do we have? Very simple. We have 3.5 years, time, times, and half a times. And again, I stress this is not a uniquely SDA interpretation, far from it. Okay, what is it talking about? Now, the first thing you have to realize when you look at this prophecy, this time prophecy does not talk about the demise of the little horn. It's saying only that for this period, 3.5 years, the saints will be given into his hands, a reference to the earlier verse when it said that he would persecute the saints of the Most High. The persecution would last for this time frame. Now, what's fascinating, and many have picked up on this, is that parallel passages in the book of Revelation help us come to understand better what this time period means. Look at this. And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time, times, and half a times from the face of the serpent. Dealing with persecution here. Times, and half a time, just as in Daniel 7:25. Now, the same thing here in Revelation 12:14, the woman fleeing persecution is depicted a few verses earlier in Revelation like this. Look at this. And the woman fled into the wilderness. We're dealing with persecution, where she had a place prepared for her of God, that it should feed her there 1,060 days. What do we have here? Both verses talk about a woman in the wilderness for a length of time in the context of persecution, as Daniel 7:25. And the same time period is depicted as 1,260 days one time, 3.5 years as another. Okay, 1,260 days or 1,260 days is the same thing as the time, and dividing of time. Now, in this verse of the book of Revelation, the language is very similar to Daniel 7, talking about the little horn. Look at this. Okay? And there was given him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given him to continue 42 months. Okay? The power that speaks blasphemy continues for 42 months. Look at Daniel 7:25. He shall speak pompous words against the Most High, then the saints shall be given into his hand for a time, time, and half a time. Sounds like we're talking about the same thing here. Well, we are. So look at the time prophecies given us. We got a time, times, and half a time. We've got 42 months and 1,260 days. First, what is this 42 months? What does that equal? Well, 1 year is 12 months. 2 years is 24 months. So that comes to 36 months. We have only half a year left. Half a year is 6 months. 36 and 6 equals how many months? What do you know? 42 months. Same as in Revelation 13:5. Okay? And there was given him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and powers was given him to continue 42 months. These verses together show that in prophetic time, a year equals 360 days, because you got 42 months, 1,260 days. Each you do the math and you'll see. So look at this. 1 year equals 360 days. 2 years equals 720 days. Half a year equals 180 days. 360, 720, 180, 1,260. Instead of giving you the math, I did it for you. Okay, so we got 1,260 days. The 1,260 days is the same as the 3.5 years, which is the same as the 42 months. So our first time prophecy here in Daniel 7:25 is 3.5 years or 42 months or 1,260 days. If you got to stop and look at that yourself, get it down, you'll see it. Now, anyone who studied Bible prophecy is familiar with what is known as the day-year principle. And please, again, and I emphasize this, like these other things, this is not a unique SDA idea. Scholars for centuries have applied the day-year principle to many of these prophecies, including this one. And what it means is simply in prophetic time, a day equals a year. The website will have a lot of information on the day-year principle. In fact, I believe that we can prove that the day-year principle must be used in these very prophecies, that's the only way they make that sense. We can show that the day-year principle is built right into the prophecies themselves, and we will do that on the website. But for our immediate purposes here, there are a few texts that show the reality of the day principle, that of a day equaling a year in prophetic literature. And now here are two commonly used ones, okay? Here are two commonly used ones. Numbers 14:34, according to the number of days in which you spied out the land, 40 days. For each day you shall bear your guilt 1 year, namely 40 years, okay? Each day, 1 year, 40 days, 40 years, very clear. It's even clearer here in Ezekiel 4:6. And when you have completed them, lie again on your right side, and you shall bear your iniquity for the house of Judah 40 days. I have laid on you a day for each year. I mean, so we see it, a day for a year. And this truth is so much, and the truth is that there's so much internal evidence for the day-year principle in these prophecies that we really don't even need these texts in Ezekiel and Numbers, but we'll use them for now. But let me give you one example. I want to give you two reasons why you need the day-year principle here. First, Daniel 2 and Daniel 7 cover thousands of years of history, right? I mean, it starts out with Babylon, more than 600 years before Christ, goes through Christ, and then it goes with Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece. It comes right down through the millennia to our time and into the future, okay? Because it starts with ancient Babylon. The point is, more than 2,600 years are covered here. Now, in this prophecy covering all this time, you know, we're given a time prophecy concerning one of these powers, a power that's greatly emphasized in the prophecy. The fact is, a great deal of emphasis is placed on it, more than any of these other massive empires. And amid more than the 2.5 millennium covered here, this time prophecy covering this major power covers only a literal 3.5 years. I mean, it's possible, but not very probable considering the scope of everything, okay? Considering this whole scope of the prophecy, then would not applying the day-year principle, meaning it would cover 1,260 years as opposed to 3.5, doesn't that make better sense given the vast context of what is being talked about in the chapters, a context that covers these long, long epochs? Of course it makes better sense. Again, considering the size and scope and time element of the entire chapter, it's really the only thing that makes sense. Second, folks, look at Daniel 7. Look at that for a minute. It's really not about a lion that has eagle's wings, or a leopard with 4 heads, or a beast with iron teeth, or a talking horn. These are all what? Of course, they're symbols. It's prophetic symbolism, images pointing to things other than themselves. Okay, so amid all these prophetic symbols, none of which are to be taken literally, should not the time prophecy be seen as symbolic and not literal as well? Of course. In a sense, it would be preposterous to take it literally. If we don't, and we do prophetic, then what do we have? Okay, there are 2 points that we have established here, 2 points that are crucial. Okay, first, the little horn power in Daniel 7 is papal Rome. I'm sorry, folks, it's solely, totally, only Rome. It can be nothing else. Second, we must apply the day-year principle to the time, times, and dividing of time, which comes out to 1,260 days, which comes out to 1,260 years. Now, with just these 2 points firmly established, we can get a general understanding of the time frame here. See, the papacy, the little horn power, didn't arise out of pagan Rome in a day. But we know basically from history that in the 500s AD, the Pope was declared the head of all churches and the corrector of heretics. I mean, its power was basically starting to get firmly cemented around that time. So you've got somewhere in the 500s. Now you go 1,260 years later, 1,260 years, then you're brought what? Into the 1700s. Most likely later in the 1700s, because you're going 1,260 years sometime after the 500s in AD. Okay? Thus again, with just 2 firmly established points. Number 1, the little horn is the papacy, and the time, times, and dividing of time needs the day-year principle. We have the basic time frame of the persecution depicted as in the prophecy. See, as Adventists, we use 538 to 1798 as the 2 specific years with very good reasons, and we can look at that in more detail on the website. I don't really want to deal so much with that now, though we'll come back to it. But for our purposes right now, we can stick with the more general time frame, which is seen in the prophecy itself. So what does it mean, this prophecy? Where does it take us? What have we seen so far in Daniel 7? Look at this, okay? Again, Daniel 7. Repeat, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, pagan Rome, papal Rome, with the first time prophecy from somewhere in the 500s to the late 1700s AD, or we like to use 538 to 1798. Now, if you need to stop and review this, do so. I mean, take your Bible and go through this, but make sure you follow the logic here. With our first prophetic time prophecy, we can help establish a specific historical background for what we have been shown in the prophecy. But now, say you've done that and you understand it. What happens next in this prophecy, in the prophetic sequence? What comes after papal Rome and the prophecy given it? Look at the sequence right from Daniel 7, 8 through 10, and 13 and 14. Follow closely because this is crucial. We're coming to the crux of things. What do the texts say? What happens after this depiction of the little horn power? Okay. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, a horn where we've gone through that with the little horn power. What happens next? What happens next in the prophecy? I beheld till the thrones were cast down, the judgment was set, and the books were opened. Okay, and then what happens after? And there was given a kingdom and dominion and glory, and a kingdom which shall not pass away, and a kingdom which shall not be destroyed. What is happening here? Verse 8 describes the papacy, the little horn power of the papacy. What immediately comes in the prophecy? Some kind of heavenly judgment scene. And then what follows after? But God establishes eternal kingdom, one that will not pass away, the kingdom which follows the second coming of Jesus. Look at the specific order of events here. I can't stress how crucial this is. You got the little horn, papal persecution. Then you've got a judgment, some kind of heavenly judgment, and then you got God's kingdom, which comes after the second coming. Again, read these verses over and over until it's seared in your brain, because what they teach is very important. It's so important, in fact, that the exact sequence of events are repeated in the same chapter. Let's read Daniel 7:21 and 22. Okay, look at this. I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them. Little horn power, until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High. Judgment, and the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. I mean, how much clearer could it be? Little horn, judgment, God's eternal kingdom. In fact, it's so important that it appears for a third time, the same three events in the same sequence. This time, though, we'll include pagan Rome, which was the early part of the papal phase, just to help you see the context better. What comes next? The fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon the earth. Okay, we know that. And 10 horns. Then we got the little horn, and they shall be given into his hand a time, and dividing time. Our first apocalyptic time prophecy, 1260 years. What comes next? But the judgment shall sit, and the kingdom and dominion and greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. Look at this, folks. How much clearer could it be? Here, the fourth kingdom, papal Rome, pagan Rome, followed by papal Rome, then the little horn with the first time prophecy regarding the fourth power, followed by judgment, which then leads to the second coming and God's eternal kingdom. Now, again, 3 times we have this sequence. You can't miss it. Little horn power. I mean, phase ending in the late 1700s, or we say more specifically 1798. You got the little horn power, then you got a judgment in heaven, and then God's eternal kingdom is established. I mean, folks, how much more clear, simpler, or more firmly established could God have made these things for us? Things that are rooted in the history of the world. Again, if you need to stop this seminar and study this from the Bible till it's perfectly clear, do it. You know, I need faith to believe in a lot of things we teach. Resurrection of the dead, the second coming, a new heavens and a new earth. But really, how much faith does it take to believe in these prophecies? These are history, things firmly rooted in the past, which means they can't change. It's as solid as a foundation as we're going to find for just about anything. We've had one kingdom after another come up just as prophesied. This can all be verified by history, the history of the world, which is, that's pretty big and broad. In the midst of all this verifiable history, we are told about this heavenly judgment, which comes up after the first apocalyptic time prophecy in Daniel, and yet before the second coming. In fact, if you really look at it carefully, this judgment leads directly to the second coming. But that's something else we'll cover later on the website. With everything else happening as firm as history, we have every reason to trust in this judgment as well. So look at what we have here so far. Look at this. This is where we've come. We've got Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, pagan Rome, then papal Rome. Okay, and they shall be given into his hand for a time dividing of time, apocalyptic time prophecy. But the judgment shall sit, and then the kingdom and dominion shall be given to the whole heaven, and shall be given to the people, the saints of the Most High. Look at this is the sequence. And this judgment, this massive end time judgment, is what leads to the second coming itself. Now, let's take a look at what we have seen so far. Okay, again, we've got Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, pagan Rome, papal Rome, persecution from 6th century to the 18th century AD. It's all sequential. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, the persecution, judgment in heaven, God's eternal kingdom. Again, folks, take your time to learn this. As I said, if you got to turn this off and go through your Bible until it's utterly clear, do it. What is certain is that amid the sequence of world kingdoms, something that is as firm and immovable as world history itself, the Bible reveals the reality of some kind of pre-Advent judgment in heaven. It's so clear, a judgment that occurs after the period of papal persecution, which we date as ending sometime around 1798, that time frame, and yet before the second coming of Jesus. Again, this is as solid and as firm and as immovable as world history itself. I said earlier that Daniel 2 formed the basis of all the prophecies that we have studied. And as we can see, that's true. Thus, here's where we've come. Look at the parallel here, Daniel 2 and Daniel 7. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, that phase ending in 1798. After that, this judgment in heaven, and then God's final kingdom. Thus, at this juncture, there's really one main point that you need to see. Catch this point, okay? There is a massive judgment in heaven, and it occurs after the times, and dividing of time in Daniel 7:25, yet before the second coming of Jesus. A massive judgment before the coming, hence the advent of Jesus, hence it's a pre-advent judgment. And again, I stress, go over these prophecies until you can see the parallels and see the sequence of events. It's firm and solid and as broad as world history itself. What a powerfully rational foundation upon which to build our trust in the word of God and these prophecies.